excited for all of you guys to join our panel on tips for landing and expanding your client roster. So excited to welcome up to the stage, I guess first off, that's me. Hey, hello. If we haven't met yet, my name is Emily and I lead community and the agency side of the business at Webflow. So this is particularly near and dear to my heart. I'm very excited to be joined by two folks that I revere a ton. And that is Alessia and Joseph, who, if you want to join me up on the stage, let's give them a quick round of applause. Awesome. All right.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
I mean, you could just stand and I think you'd be fine. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to sit down with both of you, but for those of you that may not be familiar with your work yet, do you guys mind giving a quick little intro? Maybe let's start with Alessia.
Hi, everyone. Hope the mic is working and you can hear me. I'm the co-founder of Code and Wonder. We're a digital agency. I'm based here in London, and we mainly work with marketing teams, helping them to reach their business goals through design and development.
Great, lovely. My name's Joseph Berry. I am the founder and experience designer with the new name, Experience, so that goes quite well together. I run a small creative studio, again based in London. The type of work that we work on is creative experiences, building brands, and really trying to elevate products and services through using Webflow.
Awesome. Well, today we're very excited to ask these two a bunch of hot seat questions, as well as we will have some time at the end to take any audience questions. So if there's anything ruminating in the back of your head, please start to write that down and think about it, because we will have some time at the end. Cool.
Great.
So getting started, let's face it, there are a lot of agencies out there, and there's only so many clients that you're trying to capture. How did you guys go about establishing your niche or establishing your brand out of the get-go? Maybe let's start with Joseph this time.
I think for me, my niche was pretty set from the start of kind of where I wanted to take my work and the type of work that I was trying to, get and kind of pick up. Creativity is something that was a space that I wanted to explore through creating great brands and also great experiences. So I think in that space it's important of kind of understanding the area that you want to kind of be in, and then I think it's about understanding how you can potentially stand out in that area. So for me that was a kind of key area.
Awesome. Alessia?
I wouldn't say we started necessarily with a niche. So the way that Code and Wonder started, we had a bunch of initial clients and we thought, let's start an agency. So diving straight into it. So not having a niche could be a good thing or a bad thing. I think everyone kind of finds their way, and it's up to you to find what you really want to specialize in. And I think it's a bit different between freelancers and agencies, because we have quite a few people specializing in different sections of websites or building sites. How we initially started was mainly gathering those clients and seeing what they needed in terms of what the company needed in terms of business goals, and making sure to listening to them and kind of providing that service.
Awesome. I think another side of really thinking about your brand and how you stand out is also kind of funny enough how we think about things as businesses, where it's what's your competitive advantage, or how do you competitively talk about what you have to offer? How would you articulate that to a client?
Sure. So what we're trying to do more and more is helping not just in design and development, but also just understanding what the business goal is for the company. So we often work with marketing teams, like we saw in the keynote before. A lot of the new features are also helping those marketing teams to make better decisions and analyze what their site currently does and how it performs. So one thing that we're kind of going into is helping that particular problem. So that's why initially I said, we're helping marketing teams, reach their business goals through design and development. So we're kind of putting design and development slightly back, although that's what we initially specialized in, just so that we can add that additional value to these teams.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I would, mine's again a bit of a flip to that. So mine's heavily focused on branding and creative and building the experiences. So yeah, I think for me it's always been about the type of work that you want to try and work on, and I think building and shaping around that, having a clear process, and really breaking it down in a way that is digestible for the client. I think sometimes we may overcomplicate the process and the language that we use, and I think it's really important of just trying to simplify that and being confident in that, in how you really convey the process, the system, what you're trying to achieve, the goals, how you're trying to elevate that brand or company. I think just being simple in that is a really good approach.
Awesome.
And I think this is great because we come from two very different perspectives, and
Yes.
it kind of just shows you that there isn't one fits all, but it's finding what you're best at and then kind of leveraging that.
Exactly, totally agree, yeah.
I think like that's a really fantastic narrative in this, where I think there's so many people that are out there that just like look up to folks that are in the industry or have started to build up their network, and they're like, I just want to be exactly like them. But sometimes to this point, it's really about finding what is your specific angle. Like, why would someone want to work with you? It's a lot more personal, which is really interesting to see, kind of even in your own two dynamics.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Speaking about kind of maybe pivoting less so about how you position yourselves, more so how you think about attracting clients. What are some tactics that have worked for you, or things that you may recommend for other folks to take a stab at? Maybe start with Joseph this time.
For me, I think, and this is true to my story, and you know, passion projects, I think, are something that everyone should consider in this room, or directed, more targeted projects, where you actually spend the time of thinking about the type of work that you may want to get, thinking about the type of clients that you may want to work with, and really shaping that around there. I think a passion project, why a passion project is so great and why it works so well for me is because you really actually do something that you love. And I think ultimately, you know, that's what we want to be doing. We want to be doing work that we love. I mean, in my frame, and I'm sure that everyone is the same in that sense, we want to do work that we love. And I think that's where great work then gets created from that. Example would be the Goonies. Now, how many people have seen the Goonies website that I've done? Yeah. Right, okay. So the Goonies site literally set me off on a trajectory that I would have never anticipated. And it just proves the point that one project could be the difference in changing that whole dynamic, and just keep on trying to, you know, recreate that and build up from that. You know, quick question to the audience, like, who here has done a passion project? Okay, that's quite a lot. That's great. And how many of you actually pushed that out publicly and really tried to market that? Okay, that's great. You know, I think that's super, super important that you do that. And it might not be this one. It might not be the next one. It might take time for that to happen. You know, I always say this, there's no quick way to success, and it takes time to get there. And it's about repeating that process. And each time you're learning, you're crafting, you're getting better. And for me, that's been, you know, a pinnacle point for me. And yeah, I'll give you...
I mean, I agree with everything you said. So yeah, show what you want to work on. So if you are lucky enough to have clients that match exactly what you want to be working on, like for your next project, show those, talk about them, shout about what you achieved for them. If you don't have that portfolio, exactly what you said, set some time apart to basically show the world what you can do and what you want to do, so that people know what you can achieve, and then you get those connections that way.
Personal brand is obviously another thing that I think is really important. Again, our scenario is very different, and I think that's why it's great to see this flip side. For me, it's always been about the personal brand and how I build the personal brand. And again, from a company perspective, you know, there is similarities in there. And I think it's all about, again, like showing the right work, how you show the work, how you present the work. There was a saying that we used to say in an agency, it's smokes and mirrors. You know, sometimes you've got to create a bit of smokes and mirrors, you know, jazz things up, elevate things, really present things in a way that, you know, makes it a bit more sexy. And even if something isn't sexy, you can still make it sexy. So there are other little things that I've always looked at, and I think, things that you should try and do.
Yeah. I think one of the funny things that I see a lot with the agencies and the freelancers that we talk to is just like a lot of thought around how can I make my brand, like my team really stand out? How can I get that client? How can I get as many clients? But I think I'm curious to hear from both of you, like, what do you look for that are like red flags within a client? Because sometimes finding the right client also means saying no to people. Maybe let's start with Alessia.
Yes, definitely. It's very hard to say no. It's something that I had to learn, because especially if you're starting out, you're like, oh, I need to get whatever I'm getting and kind of get all of it. But actually what then happens is that you spread yourself so thin that you don't have the time to work on those passion projects, or to make sure that you have the time for those clients that you really, really love, but all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm too busy, I can't spend as much time on them. So how do you find, well, actually the red flags, that was the question, right? I think it's really understanding who you have in front, because there are some obvious red flags, but sometimes there's a bit of a nuance, because I've worked with clients who told me up front, I'm very picky and I want everything exactly how I want them. And for me, that initially is a red flag, but actually that project turned out brilliantly and everything got signed off. So yeah, it's a bit long-winded way of saying it really, like, feeling the person that you have in front and how you can work with them, and if you are on the same level in terms of thoughts. Yeah.
I'd say quality over quantity, I think, is really important. I think it's more, for me, it's more on a like personal human level, like really understanding that person. Like, do they actually want to work with me? Do they actually believe in me? Typically clients do come to work specifically with me. They've seen my work, and I can sense that very early on that they're going to kind of give me and let me have the lead. Any client, like you said, that would be like, I don't want to touch that, because for me, I don't want to feel restricted. If I'm restricted in that space, I feel like that actually restricts me for what I can do. Obviously, limitations are good, but I want to be free, and I want a client to let me be free to be able to really breathe in that space. So I think, yeah, having clients that are going to over control the situation, for me, is always something that you want to try and avoid. There is some ways that you can combat that. For me, again, it goes back to being like super clear on the process, making sure that you outline all of the steps, how many reviews there is, this point, that point, how you do meetings. Like, one of my pet peeves, and I hate it, is if a client just drops out of the blue, can we jump on a call quickly? And I'm like, no, it's not happening, like, for me, them little things, you have to really like be upfront with that and how you work. You have to set that, and you have to let them know how you work. Like, yes, you are working with them and you want to create a good dynamic in that space, but I believe if you give the clients an inch, they'll take a yard, and then if they start to over control, you're going to quickly lose that project, and you're really going to start to struggle because you haven't set the expectations early on. So it's super important that you just you lay it down. You might seem a bit like firm or a bit over the top, but for me, it covers them issues pretty well. And
process is so important, like you said, because then everything goes out of the window. Timeline, expectations, and everything else. So yeah, setting those up front. I
do everything with a caveat. That's my way. I think sometimes we love to overpromise and underdeliver. And I think that's sometimes where we're like really trying to like, oh yeah, I can do that, I can do this, I could do it tomorrow. And then like, just shit never goes that way. Like, and I think sometimes it's been like, when you present ideas or you show ideas, you're saying, this is something that we potentially could do. If we do want to do this, this actually might cost a little bit more. Really being clear on that, rather than being like, yeah, we can do that. And then you get it and you're like, oh, I didn't realise like that was involved, and that actually this is going to take me so much more time than I actually realised. So again, it's just understanding that dynamic and just making sure that you're clear in all of them areas.
Awesome. Yeah, I think being on the client side sometimes, I am taking notes and also experiencing some PTSD from things that I may or may not have done in the past. I think one of the things that we hear more and more, especially with how many companies are now really reaching for finding a partner that they trust and really treat like an extension of the team, is kind of what's your special sauce that you try to apply to go from being a one-time agency to being, let's say, the partner of record? Let's start with Alessia.
I'd say there's 3 main points that we try to always tick in terms of clients, whether there's one-off or trying to convert that into a longer time client. The first one is the quality of work. Obviously, if you don't deliver, the chances that they're going to stick with you are a bit slimmer. The second one, which I find very interesting, is educating the client. So sometimes it's a bit counterintuitive because you're like, oh, Webflow is so intuitive and anyone could use it. And then you think, oh, if the client can use it, then that's me talking myself out of my job. But actually, I find that a lot of the clients don't necessarily understand how much knowledge or how much is involved to cover all the aspects of the website. So although it's super intuitive and they can do everything theoretically, as long as they don't break all the components that you build, it then basically educating them of all the aspects of the site. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. Actually, now I can see how much value you brought and how much you actually know and bring to the table. So I find educating the client on those aspects, or maybe the more like technical things, actually helps to position yourself in like an expert position, so that they see the value in having you around on a longer term. And then the last point was just being there for them. So sometimes clients come out of the blue being like, oh, it's completely unrelated, but I have this problem. And if you can be there and help solve those problems, I think that there's a major brownie points for sticking around.
Yeah, I think all your points are like pretty much bang on the money. Quality and the output is, for me, always going to be the star of the show. What you output, no one really cares about, how you got from A to B, unless you really like diving into that, which is going to be our side, where we're actually really understanding the process, how we get to these end results. But the client is always going to, base you and judge you on that end result. I think communication is really important. And again, going back to all the points that I've spoke across, is just, making sure that you try and communicate if things slip, or if things are going wrong, or things need to change. Communicating that early on and as often as possible. I think keeping them in the loop. When you get a client and they're kind of chasing you, they're like, "Where's this? What's this?" And then you need to kind of keep reassuring them. Communication is super important. And like you said, education. I think that's a very another valid point. Showing them that you are the expert. And kind of reassuring them in any way that you can, and by showing them, how things work, resources, the process, how things come together. I think, as you say, that kind of really gives them a bit more confidence, and also they really understand what actually goes into what you're doing.
Awesome. I think maybe reeling it back a little bit to I clearly, now you guys are up here, you feel confident in your answers, you probably have a bunch of projects you're pretty proud of at this point. I want to take us way back to very young versions of both of you. What was the very first project that you either did to try to get a client, or maybe your first client project that you did?
Well, I've got to rack back in the brain now.
Yeah. And I know it wasn't Goonies, so I want to know what pre-Goonies is.
I mean, the very first client we had as an agency was a retainer, actually.
Okay.
So
right out of the gate, you're like,
right,
agency of record. Yeah.
But this was also before we used Webflow, so we're going way back. And at the time, my role was more project manager, so managing clients. And I remember the specific client, they had their whole site built by one of a very large agency. And one thing that always stuck with me, their feedback was like, oh, we want to stop working with that agency. We want an agency that feels like a part of our team. Because they're like, oh, we don't need 15 designers on one site to design one page. We need someone that actually collaborates with us and kind of gets involved more on a like day-to-day basis and helping the team. So from then on, for every single client that also has Slack, not all of them have, but we create this channel where we open up the conversation and kind of we become part of their team. And that's, I think, how that very initial client 8 years ago kind of shaped the way that we work now.
Nice.
I remember building websites for like £500. It just shows you, like, you know, I spent, you know, numerous years working at agencies under temping and, you know, doing work basically for nothing. And like, as I said, just starting at a really like basic level. As I say, charging £500 for a site and doing bits and pieces that were in that space, and it wasn't generally fixed. Obviously, over like the years, it kind of evolved into what it is now. But you know, ultimately, it was always going to be creative. Even since, you know, being at school, I always knew that is kind of where I wanted to be, whether it was going to be art, graphics, or drama. They were the kind of melting pot at the beginning where I kind of flourished up into that space. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe sticking to your younger selves here, much wiser now.
How about that?
One hopes.
It's okay, we're all kids on the inside. I guess taking a look back, like what would be a piece of advice that you would give your former selves if, let's say, you were starting on this journey again?
I think for me, I say this all the time, and I think it's important. I know we want everything now, and it doesn't happen like that. I think it's always going to take time. You're going to evolve. I say I'm a slow burner, and sometimes you want to jump the ladder a little bit, and you want to be 5 steps in front where you actually are. So I think it's just about really understanding that, you know, it takes time to craft and become a better version. As I say, it doesn't become perfect. What's that saying? Practice makes perfect. That's actually incorrect. Practice makes improvement. And I think that's something to think about, you know, that it's not going to happen overnight. And sometimes you want something now, and just being patient.
Agree with that. Also learning to say no sooner. I've learned that way too late. And the second one is, with the improvement, also making sure that you value yourself, because it feels like at the beginning you're like, oh, I'm a beginner, I make sites for 500 quid.
Yeah.
Like, that might be okay, because, well, not anymore, but maybe at the time, but because you're like, oh, I need to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But then making sure that you push that bar up as you're improving, because a lot of the time you improve and the bar stays low. So making sure you push those up simultaneously.
I think that's the other challenge. You know, whether you run an agency or you're solo, is like how to manage all of that, because that's also a challenge. You might be a great designer, but you might be terrible at selling yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest things. Can you sell yourself? Can you sell your services? Can you sell your vision? So I think that's something that is a massive challenge. And I think that point is something that we should think about a lot as you progress. How do you progress with that change? And you have self-doubt. Should I charge more? Again, I think that comes with the work. As the work progresses and the work gets better, you can start to bring yourself to that level. I find in the Twitter space, I think, you know, it's obviously good to be open about what we charge for work and how, but I also think that is really, like, kind of realistic to where you are and the kind of work that you're doing. I think sometimes you see someone, and this is the problem with Twitter, I find someone says, oh, I've made 25 grand on a website, And then you're like, well, I should be able to charge 25 grand. But I think that's, paramount to the level, the proof, the skills, and how you then actually be able to demand that. I think it's, as you said, you've got to progress and build with that level. I cite this all the time from Joe Krug from FinSuite. He says this, and I think this is a really good piece of advice, and it's something that I do with every project up to a certain point that's got me to this point. If you get a 5 grand site, make it into a 10 grand site. Go above and beyond. Take it to that next level. You've got the opportunity. Take it to that next level, because then when the opportunity of a 10 grand site comes, you go, there's a 10 grand site. Because it's very easy then to sell that, because you've already elevated that level to be able to demand that fee. And working to that formula for me has really helped, where I always want to keep pushing. Sometimes it's a bit of a, I need to learn when to say, no, this is actually like a 5 grand site and I need to stop. But I think it's a good habit and a good kind of urge to want to do that, because then that really helps you push your work and then also be able to sell that work.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point around not everybody feels comfortable selling, and that could be super unnatural when you are either forming your practice for the first time, maybe changing roles, or starting to think about brand. Because I think for a lot of people that are in the design space, you're really focused on serving. Okay, cool. How can I prove myself? How can I show up that way? I guess if you were to give advice to somebody today on how to get more comfortable with promoting yourself or understanding how to market your brand, what would you say?
I think collaboration is a big thing for me. I think it applies both as a freelancer or agencies, because we mentioned, or you mentioned also, benchmarks that you see on X, Twitter, all the social media, but you have no context around it. But as soon as you collaborate with someone, and it's always better if you collaborate with someone you think it's better than you or has more experience than you, because then you learn how they benchmark themselves, and then you're like, oh, okay, am I at the same level, or what do I need to reach that level?
Yeah.
And you see how these people kind of interact with the clients and how they sell themselves. So it's all like a learning curve, which I think collaboration is the best way to actually understand how other people manage.
Yeah, I would agree. I do think collaboration is a great form of building that confidence and understanding. I think Webflow's opened up a whole world of people from all different aspects. Some may not have been trained, some may not have gone to university, some have come in fresh. And I think when you go into a freelance world or creating, it's hard because you don't actually probably have the proper traditional training of being in an agency. So working with other people is definitely going to help you, or even working with other agencies. So if you are a freelancer, working with other agencies, seeing how they set their process up, I think again is going to really help you feel more confident. And then back to my point, as I said, if you keep your process simple and you just keep drilling that into you and you just keep repeating it, every phone call that I take and I would present myself or my services, I say the same shit that I've probably said about 500 times. I may say it slightly differently, but it's ingrained in me now. So when I'm selling it, it's coming across strong, it's coming across confident. I know what I'm saying, I know how the process works, I know the steps. I'm selling the dream, basically. And I think because I've just regurgitated that over and over again. So working out what that process is, creating some sort of methodical kind of plan in how you're going to speak through that. How do you deliver projects? What's your time frames? How's your process? All of these different things that you've got the right answers, because they're going to be the basic questions that you're going to get asked. And if you don't give off that confident energy, clients will feel that, because it is almost like a little mini interview that you're going to be taking on these calls. So you really need to be give it as much as you can in the best possible way.
Awesome. Yeah. I have one more question for you guys before I open it up to everybody over there. So if you have some questions, get ready. And I guess so we just talked about a lot of trends, things have evolved a bunch. I know that we have some folks here that are also very excited about animations and new ways that, honestly, maybe you. I don't know if you've seen his video, but it's not safe for work. And, I guess my question to you guys is, what are some of the trends that you're looking out for that you would encourage other people to really keep an eye out for, especially when you're thinking about web and what clients might be asking for? Maybe Alessia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about the new features of optimizing the sites and the analytics that are going to be all built in, because a lot of the time we don't necessarily have those analytics. They're kind of like guarded by the client. So it's going to be interesting how those trends kind of come into the design sphere of how we design and how we develop with more of a maybe analytical mind without taking anything away from the creative side as well. But it's like combining those two. I think it's really exciting for me.
Awesome.
Animation. That's all I can say.
Didn't expect anything else from me.
Feel free to use the same colorful language if you'd like.
For me, I'm always keen on like pushing the boundaries. I think in my aspect, like that's the area that I'm always trying to like thrive in, whether that be through, branding, UI, animation. How can we really like push that using tools? Again, like that integration, that was like that little, I've got to start learning JavaScript. I've got to go into this world of GSAP. I really want to be able to use this. I obviously, of course, have been heavily focused on animation IX2 in Webflow, and I can do pretty much, everything. But there is limitations to that. So having these new opportunities now where Webflow is really starting to bring in different tools, I think is definitely an area that we should look at and how we can utilize them tools. But then I also say, on the other hand, is not to be like a kid in a candy shop trying to like do everything, because I think again sometimes you like might get too distracted. Like there's Spline, then we've got Rive, then we've got GSAP. There's lots of things that are coming on. So I think if there is an area that you are excited about, try and commit to it and see it through and hopefully get to where you want to get with it.
Awesome. All right, so now we're going to turn it over to the audience. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. I know we made eye contact first, so I'm going to give it to you. Yeah.
So I think one thing you, Joseph, said was patience. Understanding that mastery of the craft takes time. That's the only way how you're going to make your business successful.
Yep.
What I've seen in my experience, and that's something I had to overcome, and I see with many people as well, is there's kind of this fear of having to make money or running away from something you don't like.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of need to pay the bills,
yeah.
And so like there's this feeling of missing out on clients and stuff. But that's the thing where growth is kind of hindered. Because in order to get better, to make more money, you need to commit to actually doing more than the payment.
Yeah.
So how did you overcome those things? For both of you.
Yeah, I would probably say, obviously it's difficult because we've all got bills to pay and we're all trying to fight in a pretty heavy space where there's lots of people all fighting for the same type of work. My approach has been, it's not necessarily about the money. And I think that's something that you've got to try and get your head around, especially the early stages where you're trying to break through. It's more about what the project can do for you and what you can do for the project, I think is really, really important. Like, don't think, money, because if you think about money, you're just going to be thinking about money, and it's more about thinking about what that project can actually do for you. So it's trying to balance that, and then, as I said earlier, like finding the time to do passion projects to help you elevate them steps up, to be able to say, well, the work that I'm doing right now, I don't know if I'd put it in my portfolio. Or, as I said, actually try and make that and put it into your portfolio, go that step above and beyond. So using that kind of strategy for me has helped. But I know it's not easy because, you need to pay for things, you need to get money. So I know that plays a big big kind of factor on people's mind, but try and think about project first rather than money first.
I guess I'd say calculate how much you need to survive, let's say.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, I have X amount of time, X amount of hours per day, let's say. And you kind of try, and this is very hard, I grant you, kind of how, like as little as possible of that time to match that minimum. And if that project is actually one of your passion projects, go over and beyond, like Joseph said. But if that is not what you actually want to do, kind of try and minimize that as much as you can so that you have time to work on those passion projects. So then in the future, you can completely cut this off and all of your passion projects kind of go towards your living or your salary. So that's what I would suggest.
Totally makes sense. That's kind of how it happened to me as well. It's like
Yeah.
once I took the time to actually create pieces of work that I know great clients will want
Yep.
to do, and I did it in free time for free. When you share that, then
Yeah, that gets you more work than you even really realise. I think sometimes you're so fixated on taking work, getting money, but then you're losing the sight of how that's actually going to elevate you. And I think you get so fixated on just, like you say, not saying no, taking projects, then not really taking the right project. And then you land up getting into this kind of snowball effect of just grinding. And then when you're grinding, there's only so much grinding you can do before you're like, shit, when is things going to get a little bit better for me, or when a new opportunity is going to come to me? And I think that's the thing that's going to beat you down at the end.
Awesome. All
you gotta
right.
become the person that's like, it's not about finding a great client, but become the type of person that a great client will want.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, we have time for 2 quick ones up in front. I think Claudia's coming with you, the microphone. Thank you.
When it comes to pricing client projects, how granular do you go in breaking down the cost? Do you just say this is a cost, or do you break it down? And does that change depending on the type of client?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I try not to go too granular unless they ask for it. That would be my first port of call. Don't go too granular to start with. I think the reason why you don't want to go too granular to start with is because they can actually start to see how you're formulating pricing structure. And then if you have to then bill for something else, then they're going to have a reference point. And I think that's where you could get a bit unstuck. Because they'd be like, well, you charge this for this, and now you're saying this is this. So when you go too granular, I think you're going to open yourself opportunities for them to maybe call you out if you do have a long-term client and then they keep coming back. So try and keep it top level. And then if you want to go down another level, I would break it down into the subsection. So branding, UI, UX, and then development. And then if you want to go granular than that, then I would probably say run.
I love this panel because I was going to say go granular.
Don't go granular. Don't.
Not too much. So it's not like, oh, we allocated X amount of hours for this, but we break down the big chunks. So branding would actually also be broken down in several things.
Oh, so you don't break out into the... Right,
yeah.
Okay.
Because it actually helps me kind of educate the client, because they're like, branding is just a logo. And I'm like, no, it's typography, it's colors, it's this, it's that. So it's a way for me to educate the client of how much work goes into it. Double-edged sword, I grant you.
Yeah.
Because then they can call you out being like, oh, but here you said this.
Yep.
But then I guess it depends how the granularity is broken down. Because then you can say, oh, this whole animation, if you look at the list, is not in there.
Yeah.
So it could be good and bad. And I guess it also depends by the client, how picky
it
they are.
just shows you like there's no one size fits all for it, but transparency is obviously key, but sometimes over transparency can maybe get you into positions. You just got to have good answers, and you've got to have good ways of, educating them on why and the reasons behind that.
Awesome. All right, we got one more quick hit, and on the back.
So candidly, I'm afraid of letting people down, and as I mentioned, loads of people are. Ooh, okay, that's weird. Right. But sometimes when you need to like make room for new opportunities and nurture like those relationships, and they can become like long-term partners, you might have to like let go of an existing one, and it might be a really good relationship. And I was just wondering how you guys like personally navigate, quote unquote, that breakup, because it's not, you have to kind of make room, otherwise you spread yourself too thin. Right?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's business. Like you need to understand that first and foremost, that it is business and business needs to grow. So not all clients are going to be lifetime clients. Some clients might be one-off. And I think, you're not letting anyone down. As long as you've done a good job for that client and they're happy and you can send them away with a golden ribbon, then that's all that really matters. Don't feel that you're overly committed to that person. They're not family. They're a business friend or a partner. So yeah, just don't take that too seriously. Think about the progression and the growth more than, I'm letting go of this client. Maybe the reason you're letting go of this client is because a new client that has come along is obviously, offering a lot more to the table, which is actually going to help you and benefit you and grow. And there may be other ways that you can direct that. You could say, okay, we might not be working together, but I've got a certain person that I would love you to connect to, give recommendations, point them in the right direction, and of course say, look, the door is always open when you need me for something. And when that opportunity arises, we'll see what we can do at that time as and when that comes in, and just try and keep it as open and free as possible. Yeah, you can't get rid of him.
But yeah, recommending people says like, oh, I can't continue working with you, but here's someone that I trust who can take over. It's always an easier conversation than bye and then leaving them. Oh yeah. Another thing, but I don't know whether it was more maybe agency side, if it's a really good client that you enjoy working with, and again, if it fits within, the future projects that you want to work on, but maybe they don't have the right budget or they don't have, I don't know, there's something that the new client is bringing to the table, you can have an open conversation being like, look, this is the direction we're going. These are the new plans. We can either transfer you to the new plan, it might be more expensive, or it might offer new other values or anything like that. But you give them a choice and you're actually upselling the client that you already have a relationship with. And selling to an existing client is way easier than trying to gain a new one. So again, it depends on the client. If you want to break up with them, then you should. But if you're on the edge, it's like, I'd love to still be working with them, but they don't offer what this new client is offering, then you can have an open conversation and see whether they would match that offer as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you to everybody for coming, and let's give a quick round of applause for our panelists.